tryptophan greater access into the brain. For example, having a carb-rich breakfast like waffles and orange juice resulted in higher tryptophan levels in those studied than did a protein-rich breakfast of turkey, eggs, and cheese. This principle may explain why women suffering from premenstrual syndrome, PMS, sometimes crave carbohydrate-rich food. Consumption of even a single carb-rich protein-poor meal has been shown to improve depression, tension, anger, confusion, sadness, fatigue, alertness, and calmness scores among women with PMS. In a year-long study, about 100 men and women were randomly assigned to eat either a low-carb or high-carb diet. By the end of the year, the subjects eating the high-carb diets experienced significantly less depression, hostility, and mood disturbances than those on the low-carb diet. This result is consistent with studies finding better moods and less anxiety among populations eating diets higher in carbohydrates and lower in fats and protein. Carbohydrates may facilitate tryptophan transport into the brain, but you still need a dietary source of tryptophan. Ideally, it would have a high tryptophan-to-protein ratio to facilitate brain access. Such seeds as sesame, sunflower, or pumpkin may fit the bill. Indeed, a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of butternut squash seeds for social anxiety disorder reported a significant improvement in an objective measure of anxiety within an hour of consumption. All these factors may contribute to the comprehensive improvement in mood one may achieve after just a few weeks on a plant-based diet. Saffron. The earliest recorded medical use of a spice appears to be more than 3,600 years ago, when saffron was evidently first used for healing. A few thousand years later, scientists finally put saffron to the test in a head-to-head trial against the antidepressant drug Prozac for the treatment of clinical depression. Both the spice and the drug worked equally well in reducing depression symptoms. As I'll note in a bit, this may not be saying much, but at the very least the saffron was safer in terms of side effects. For example, 20% of the people in the Prozac group suffered sexual dysfunction, a common occurrence with many antidepressant medications, whereas no one in the saffron group did. However, saffron may be one of those rare cases in which the natural remedy is more expensive than the drug. Saffron is the world's most expensive spice. It's harvested from crocus flowers, specifically the dried stigmas, the thread-like tips inside the flower, which are ground up to make the spice. You need more than 50,000 crocuses, enough to cover a football field, to produce just a single pound of saffron. A Prozac equivalent dose of saffron may cost more than twice as much as the drug, but a subsequent study found that even just smelling saffron appeared to have psychological benefits. The researchers diluted the spice so much that the study subjects couldn't even detect its odor. They still noted a significant drop in stress hormones measured in women who sniffed the saffron for 20 minutes, compared to those who spent 20 minutes smelling a placebo, along with significant improvements in the women's symptoms of anxiety. So if you're feeling anxious, perhaps wake up and smell the saffron. Coffee and aspartame. Speaking of waking up to pleasant aromas, a cup of coffee may be doing more for the brain than just making it feel less groggy in the morning. Researchers from Harvard University looked at data from 3 large cohort studies of more than 200,000 American men and women. They found that people who drank 2 or more cups of coffee daily appeared to have only half the suicide risk compared to non-coffee drinkers. What about drinking more than 4 cups a day? A Kaiser Permanente study of more than 100,000 people found that suicide risk seemed to continue to drop with increases in coffee dose. People who drank more than 6 cups a day were 80% less likely to commit suicide, though drinking 8 or more cups a day has been associated with increased suicide risk. What you put in your coffee may also make a difference. The NIH AARP study, which followed hundreds of thousands of Americans for a decade, found that frequent consumption of sweetened beverages may increase the risk of depression among older adults. Indeed, adding sugar to coffee may negate many of its positive effects on mood, and adding the artificial sweetener aspartame, found in Equal and NutraSweet, or saccharin in Sweet and Low, was associated with an increased risk of depression. The controversy surrounding the neurological effects of aspartame began in the 1980s. At first, concern was limited to those with pre-existing mental illness. An early study at Case Western Reserve University was halted prematurely for safety reasons because subjects with a history of depression appeared to be experiencing such a severe reaction to the sweetener. The researchers concluded that, quote, individuals with mood disorders are particularly sensitive to this artificial sweetener, and its use in this population should be discouraged. Only recently, though, were the neurobehavioral effects of aspartame investigated in a population free from mental illness. Healthy individuals were split into two groups. Half were given a higher dose of aspartame, the equivalent of about 3 liters of Diet Coke's worth, and the other half received a lower dose, like a single liter of Diet Coke's worth. Then the groups were switched. Bear in mind that the higher aspartame diet contained just half the acceptable daily intake of the stuff as determined by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. After only 8 days on the higher aspartame dose, participants exhibited more depression and irritability and performed worse on certain brain function tests. So not only may aspartame cause adverse mental effects in sensitive populations, but it may also harm the general public at sufficient doses. Avoiding diet soda and those pastel paper packets seems easy enough, but artificial sweeteners are also present in more than 6,000 products, including breath mints, cereals, chewing gums, jams and jellies, juice drinks, puddings, and even nutritional bars and yogurts. This prevalence has led researchers to assert that aspartame, quote, is impossible to completely eradicate from daily encounters, unquote. But of course, that's only true for people who eat processed foods. This is yet another reason to spend most of your time at the grocery store in the produce aisle. Discriminating shoppers make it a priority to read ingredients lists, but the healthiest foods in the supermarket don't even have them. Exercise versus antidepressants. We've known for decades that even a single workout can elevate mood, and that physical activity is associated with decreased symptoms of depression. One study of nearly 5,000 people across the country, for example, found that people who exercise regularly had 25% lower odds of major depression diagnoses. Of course, studies like these may not mean that exercise reduces depression. Maybe it means that depression reduces exercise. In other words, if you're depressed, you might feel too lousy to get out of bed and go for a walk. What was needed to test this idea was an interventional study, one in which depressed subjects were split at random, randomized, into two groups, one that exercised and one that didn't. That's what a team of researchers at Duke University attempted. They randomly assigned depressed men and women aged 50 or older to either begin an aerobic exercise program or take the antidepressant drug sertraline, known as Zoloft. Within 4 months, the mood of those in the drug group improved so much that they were, on average, no longer depressed. But the same powerful effect was found in the exercise group. That is, the group of people who weren't taking any drugs. Exercise seemed to work just as well as the medication. Let's play devil's advocate for the moment. The drug-free group in the Duke study met 3 times each week for an exercise class. Could the social stimulation, rather than the exercise, have improved their mood? With this question in mind, the same researchers subsequently conducted the largest ever exercise trial of patients with depression. This time, they added a group. So one group took antidepressants, one group took an exercise class, and a new group did exercises by themselves at home. The results? No matter the setting, whether subjects were alone or in a group, exercise appeared to work about just as well as drugs at bringing depression into remission. So, before your doctor writes you a prescription for an antidepressant, ask about prescribing a daily workout instead. Antioxidants and folate. Accumulating evidence suggests that free radicals, those highly unstable molecules that cause tissue damage and contribute to aging, may play an important role in the development of various psychiatric disorders, including depression. Modern imaging techniques confirm autopsy studies showing a shrinkage of certain emotion centers in the brains of depressed patients that may be due to death of nerve cells in these areas caused by free radicals. This phenomenon may help explain why those eating more fruits and vegetables, which are rich in antioxidants that extinguish free radicals, appear to protect against depression. A study of nearly 300,000 Canadians found that greater fruit and vegetable consumption was associated with lower risk of depression, psychological distress, mood and anxiety disorders, and poor perceived mental health. The researchers concluded that eating antioxidant-rich plant foods may dampen the detrimental effects of oxidative stress on mental health. The Canadian study relied on questionnaires asking people to self-report fruit and vegetable intake, a method that's not always accurate. A nationwide American study took it one step further and measured the level of carotenoid phytonutrients in people's bloodstreams. These phytonutrients include some of the yellow, orange, and red antioxidant pigments found naturally in some of our healthiest foods, including sweet potatoes and green leafy vegetables. Not only did people with higher levels of these nutrients in their bloodstreams have a lower risk of depression symptoms, but there was also an apparent dose-response relationship, meaning that the higher the levels of these phytonutrients, the better people seemed to feel. Among the carotenoids, lycopene, the red pigment in tomatoes, has the highest antioxidant activity. Indeed, a study of nearly 1,000 elderly men and women found that people who ate tomatoes or tomato products daily had just half the odds of depression compared with those who ate them once a week or less. If antioxidants are so helpful, why can't we just pop a few antioxidant pills? Well, only food sources of antioxidants appear to be protectively associated with depression. The same can't be said for dietary supplements. This finding may indicate that the form and delivery of the antioxidants we consume are crucial to ensure their best effects. Alternately, antioxidants may just be a marker for other components of plant-rich diets, such as folate. Folate is a B vitamin concentrated in beans and greens. Its name comes from the Latin word folium, meaning leaf, because it was first isolated in spinach. Early studies linking depression to low folate levels in the blood were cross-sectional in nature, meaning they were only snapshots in time. For this reason, we didn't know whether low folate intake led to depression, or if depression itself led to low folate intake. However, more recent studies following people over time suggest that low dietary folate intake may indeed increase the risk of severe depression by as much as threefold. However, once again, folate supplements, folic acid, did not appear to help. Vegetables, including antioxidant-rich tomatoes and folate-packed greens, may be good for the body and the mind. Do antidepressant drugs really work? We've seen that saffron and exercise compare favorably to drugs in treating depression. But how much is that really saying? Thousands of published studies seem to have demonstrated that antidepressant drugs are effective. The key word here, though, may be published. What if drug companies decided to publish only those studies that showed a positive effect, but quietly shelved and concealed any studies that showed the drugs didn't work? To find out if this was the case, researchers applied to the Food and Drug Administration under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act to get access to the published and unpublished studies submitted by pharmaceutical companies. What they found was shocking. According to the published literature, the results of nearly all antidepressant trials were positive. In contrast, FDA analysis of trial data, including the unpublished studies, demonstrated that roughly half of the trials showed the drugs didn't work after all. When all the data, published and unpublished, were combined, antidepressants failed to show a clinically significant advantage over placebo sugar pills. This finding suggests that the placebo effect explains the apparent clinical effectiveness of antidepressants. In other words, improvements in mood may be a result of the patient's belief in the power of the drug, not the drug itself. Even worse, the Freedom of Information Act documents revealed that the FDA knew that these drugs, such as Paxil and Prozac, didn't work much better than placebo, yet made an explicit decision to shield drug companies by keeping this information from the public and from prescribing physicians. How could drug companies get away with this? The pharmaceutical industry is considered one of the most profitable and politically powerful industries in the United States, and mental illness is considered a golden goose, a chronic, common, and often treated with multiple drugs. Indeed, antidepressants are currently prescribed to more than 8% of the population. Just because antidepressant drugs may not work better than fake pills doesn't mean they don't work at all. Antidepressants offer substantial benefits to millions of people suffering from depression. And although the placebo effect is real and powerful, antidepressants do seem to beat out sugar pills in reducing symptoms in the most severely depressed, perhaps about 10% of patients. Although admittedly, this statistic also means that about 90% of depressed patients may be prescribed medication with negligible benefit. If doctors are willing to give patients placebo-equivalent treatments, some argue that it would be better for them to just lie to patients and give them actual sugar pills. Unlike the drug, sugar pills do not cause side effects. For example, antidepressants cause sexual dysfunction in up to 3/4 of users. Other problems may include long-term weight gain and insomnia, and about 1 in 5 people have withdrawal symptoms when they try to quit. Perhaps most tragically, antidepressants may make people more likely to become depressed in the future. Studies show that patients are more likely to become depressed again after treatment with antidepressants than after treatment with other means, including placebos. So even if the mood-boosting benefit of exercise is also a placebo effect, at least it's one with benefits rather than risks. Just reading the dry statistics and all the studies, it's hard to appreciate the suffering. Seeing a graph in which depression scores drop for even hundreds of people doesn't hit me on the same gut level as seeing a single email in my inbox of someone sharing his or her story of physical and emotional renewal. Not long ago, a woman wrote to me after her battle with depression.